At 10:07, it's 97.3 ABC Illawarra. And yes, that time has come around again where I get to talk about hemochromatosis, one of those things that I've been quite proud of being associated with. Ever since several years ago now, I was speaking to Di Prince from Haemochromatosis Australia, and I was preparing for the interview, and I thought to myself, these guys really need a jingle. This is a very difficult to pronounce thing, and yet they have this nice acronym, which is HA, or HA, and I immediately thought of James Brown. So as a special surprise for the boss at Haemochromatosis Australia, I did this early in the morning. Yeah, it's a pretty daggy old guitar.
Hey, are you pumping too much iron? Are you an iron man? Or an iron woman? Well, you know you might have hemochromatosis. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was just me doing it on an iPhone app and a pretty crappy old nylon string guitar. However, Di Prince really enjoyed that little surprise, and she called me up later on and said, would you like to turn it into a proper jingle? Now, I did used to do that once upon a time, write jingles and sing jingles. And so I dusted off some of my old equipment and I came up with something which I thought was not bad.
Good people, are you feeling heavy? Well, your body might be storing too much iron, baby. You know, I'm talking about hemochromatosis. Tricky to say, easy to test, simple to treat, and tragic to ignore. Hemochromatosis. Talk to your doctor, baby. Hemochromatosis. Brought to you by Haemochromatosis Australia.
Ha! Yes, and to my delight, that little jingle was also turned into an animation, which has gone all around the world. And I feel like all of my dreams have come true. I've finally been animated as if I was a writer on The Simpsons or something like that. But in between all of the fun, of course, there's a very serious disease, or a potentially serious disease for many people. Hemochromatosis affects a lot of people, and many people don't even know it, which is why you heard that there. It's easy to detect and tragic to ignore. Haemochromatosis Australia's scientific director, advisor, I beg your pardon, is Dr. Dan Johnstone, and joins me now here at ABC Illawarra. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Nick, how you going?
How would you describe this disease? What does it do to the body?
This disease, it's a disease of having too much iron in the body, essentially. So what happens is that over time, the body absorbs more iron from the diet than it actually needs to function. And that can slowly build up in various organs of the body, in particular the liver. I guess the thing about iron is it's a very reactive metal. So, you know, most people, it can be stored away quite safely. But when that storage capacity is exceeded, then it starts to participate in all these chemical reactions that essentially damage the organs. It's like rusting from within. So, yeah, iron is important, but too much iron is no good for you and needs to be controlled.
And what happens to the liver if it builds up?
Well, in the liver, you know, it starts with tissue damage, and then that can turn into, you know, fibrosis or hardening of the liver, cirrhosis following that, and ultimately, if it's left untreated, it can turn into liver cancer, which is, you know, one of the most tragic things. And other parts of the body are affected too. You know, you can have diabetes due to damage to the pancreas. The joints can be affected, causing arthritis. All sorts of things. So, you know, wherever iron deposits, if it's not stored appropriately, it can cause damage to those tissues. So that's why it's important to keep those iron levels in check.
And the thing that fascinated me when I first learned about this all those years ago was that the treatment is essentially a social good. All you have to do is donate blood.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've tried to rack my brain. I think it's the only medical condition I can think of where the treatment for that condition actually generates something that's a benefit to others in the community.
I know, isn't that amazing? This is the incredible thing about this condition. I mean, I know it's a disease, or is it a potential disease if you let it go longer?
Well, it's a potential disease, that's for sure. It's a genetic condition, so people born with a particular genetic makeup are predisposed to developing that disease. So what we want to try and do is to detect those people early and stop it from actually becoming disease. So it's just a risk that can be managed throughout life. And if we can detect it early, like you say, donate blood and you should be well protected from any disease ever occurring.
Do we know much about the genetic pathway and why this builds up in certain people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all been known for a long time now. So we know more than 90% of cases are caused by a single mutational variant in a single gene, the same single mutation, the same single gene in more than 90% of people. So we have laboratory tests that can very easily detect that and pick it up, at any stage of life. We also have blood tests that can monitor how your iron levels are, so we can keep an eye on those to make sure the treatment is appropriate. And then we also have a treatment as well. So as far as disease that can be prevented, we've got everything in place in terms of detection, treatment, management. The key thing is trying to detect people early, and that's where screening programs and those sorts of things could be extremely beneficial.
That's right. So we have this easy treatment which actually creates a positive benefit for someone else. Mm-hmm. That is your blood.
Yeah.
Even if you've got hemochromatosis and you donate blood, can your blood be treated exactly the same as anyone else's? It can be given to accident victims, to surgeries, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. If you donate it through the Red Cross Lifeblood, so the regular donor centres, they can use that blood just like they would use anyone else's blood, provided you meet all the other criteria. But there's nothing wrong with the blood at all. It's perfectly good. It's just we're getting rid of it so we can deplete some of the iron from the body and keep you healthy.
I just love these facts about hemochromatosis. All right, now that brings us to the weak part of it, which is to look at the symptoms which are not that specific about whether you might have hemochromatosis or not. What should people be looking at?
Yeah, that's one of the big challenges, and I think it's why it goes underdiagnosed, is that the symptoms are very non-specific. They're things that you might find in a whole range of other, for various different causes. So the most common things we'd usually see are things like fatigue, lethargy, joint pain, those sorts of problems. So the unusual thing about it is that a lot of people that are picked up, and particularly a lot of women that are picked up with hemochromatosis, but on a suspicion of having too little iron, having iron deficiency, because there's sort of that overlap with symptoms of anemia in terms of fatigue and lethargy. So they go thinking they're going to need to take iron supplements or something, but have a blood test and find out they've actually got too much iron and need to be depleted. So, I mean, a family history obviously is a genetic condition. I think the things to be on the lookout there are definitely, the energy levels, fatigue, any arthritis. It's very simple at the next checkup at the GP to request the iron studies, which is just the blood test that will give you an indication of whether those iron levels are raised. So it's just something that we're trying to raise awareness of, so people are vigilant about this condition and don't end up down the track once the damage has already been done. They're the most tragic stories, knowing it could have been prevented.
Yeah. I mean, that is, again, one of the odd stories about this condition. You could think you've got low iron, and yet you may have high iron because the symptoms are the same.
Yeah.
I find that amazing. So
how very hard to pick up on the symptoms.
How often would your typical hemochromatosis sufferer have to donate, have to give blood?
Well, it depends. So when they're first diagnosed, that's going to depend on how high their iron levels are, how much is built up. So if it's a lot, then people will go into a fairly intensive de-ironing phase where they might give once a week, once every couple of weeks for a short period of time, months to a year maybe. But after that, and many of us are like this now, we're just essentially regular donors. We might donate once every 3 months, once every 6 months, something like that. So just what a regular blood donor would. So once you get those levels down to the sort of normal range, it can be maintained pretty easily with fairly sporadic donations.
Right. Do some people hold more iron in their body than others?
Yeah, well, yes, they seem to. And there's all sorts of other different modifiers of this condition that we're still trying to, learn about. So, for example, a lot of people, 1 in 150, if they're from a sort of Northern European background, will have a genetic makeup that puts them at high risk of hemochromatosis. But not all of those will actually develop iron overload that leads to disease. So there's lots of other factors that influence whether this genetic makeup is going to lead to hemochromatosis and iron overload. So these are all things we're trying to understand in the research world.
All right, great to catch up with you today, and thanks very much for giving us some more info. Dan, good on you.
No, thanks very much for all you've done for the cause, Nick, and everything raising awareness. That jingle's really stood the test of time. So
it'll outlive me, I think, Dan.
Yeah. Well, that's your legacy.
Good on you.
We appreciate everything you've done for us.
No worries, mate. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All the best.
It's Dr. Dan Johnstone. Unfortunately, you don't have to spell hemochromatosis if you want to look them up. It's just ha.org.au, H-A. But feel free to learn how to spell it. It's a useful thing for you if you happen to go on Guy Mont Spelling Bee.